Unlike other countries, in South Korea, an act of unfairly indicating authors of dissertations is regarded as research misconduct, in the same manner as fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. This represents that the practice of unfairly indicating the author is pervasive in our country. In the Guidelines for Securing Research Ethics by the Ministry of Education, unfair authorship is suggested as cases where authorship is granted despite no contributions for research contents or outcomes. Cases where authorship is not granted despite contributions for research contents or outcomes. In cases where advisors publish and present their advisees' dissertations for a degree with the advisors' names only. The third case also shows that such a practice has been pervasive in Korea. Then, who can and should be an author in academic activities? An author is a person who made a substantially intellectual contribution to the research of the publishing dissertation. The International Committee of Medical Journal Editors defines a contribution to a dissertation as the contribution to plan research and to collect, analyze, and interpret materials, the creation of a draft of a paper, and critical review about academically important contents. The approval of a final version of a paper that is to be published, and the verification and resolution of questions regarding the accuracy and integrity of research contents, and thus agreement for bearing the responsibility for all aspects of the research, and stipulates that authorship is applicable only if these four conditions are fulfilled. According to this, a person who provides or collects research data, a person who supervises the technology within a research group, such as technicians and operators, a provider of laboratory space or research equipment, a contributor to obtain research funds, and a chief of the research group cannot be authors despite their contributions to research, and therefore, one should indicate such contributions in epilogues or acknowledgments. This is an extremely strict criterion and is becoming the standard guideline in the biomedical science field. However, these criteria may be difficult to apply for some academic fields. For instance, an experiment for detecting a gravity wave in physics or an experiment using a particular accelerator requires large-sized equipment. And in such fields where large-sized equipment is necessary, there is a standard rule that all people who participated in the operation of such equipment become the authors, and therefore we cannot regard all of them as unfair authorship. The increasing importance of authorship ethics is related to the increasing importance of qualified research achievements, such as the number of dissertations in all kinds of evaluations, and the fiercer competition for research jobs and obtaining research funds. Accordingly, there are growing instances of including researchers who are not qualified or insufficient for authorship as authors through personal relationships, which is a gift author. Instances that two researchers habitually let their names included in each other's dissertation, which is a swab author. Instances of including celebrities who did not participate in research as authors without consent to increase the likelihood of dissertations to be selected, which is a disguised author, and instances of excluding people who played important roles in research from authorship, which is a ghost author. When comparing between mathematics fields, where one dissertation commonly includes one or two authors, and large-size experiment fields, where they include thousands of authors, we can conclude that it is desirable to establish the criteria of authorship according to different academic fields based on academia and academic journals. Although the criteria of authorship has been established in the medical science field with efforts from various institutions, including the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, not all academic fields have made universal agreements on this. Hence, as a transitional measure, some academic journals require authors to indicate their roles played in each paper, and more academic journals are following such rules. Just revealing concretely which tasks that one took charge of becomes a case for researchers to pay extra attention to authorship. And furthermore, it is reported that it is also effective to prevent unfair authorship. Recently, in South Korea, there are instances that minor high school students participate in journal articles. Authorship may be given to them if they made fair contributions to a paper. However, a case that one becomes an author of a paper using special relationships with his or her parents, despite no intellectual contributions as the author, or a case that one becomes an author of certain research themes which are seemingly difficult for high school students to conduct, can become controversial issues. The best practices for designing authorship by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency specifies that children's or spouses' research participation must receive consent in advance, as such cases correspond to conflict of interest. However, unfortunately, the universal criteria about conflict of interest of authorship are yet to be made in South Korea. There are not many differences in authorship between minors and adults. In order for high school students to receive fair authorship, their participation in research should be directly related to the data of papers. They should sufficiently understand and take responsibility for the contents of papers as authors, and they should go through the process of the creation of a draft, critical review, and approval of the submitted paper along with other authors. On the other hand, if one simply collected and provided data or helped the operation of equipment, he or she should not be indicated as an author, but should be indicated in acknowledgement. A fact that simply doing one's best is irrelevant with authorship. To sum up, authorship can be applied with different criteria depending on the characteristics of academic fields. But the most important principle is that a potential author's scope and role must be discussed in advance. All authors must agree on the composition of authors when writing a paper, and each author's role must be clearly presented when submitting the paper. Gift authors, swap authors, and distinguished authors should be eradicated, and ghost authors who play an extremely important role in the research but are excluded from authorship due to the lack of direct relationship with research should also be eradicated.